Welcome to a year in review. Over the course of the next hour, we're going to look at many of the top stories and memorable stories, both in Prince George and Northern BC. And we start in January here at City Hall, where City Council gave taxpayers in the city of Prince George a break. However, there are some on council that say that this will hurt the city of Prince George in the long run.
All those in favor?
Everyone on council knew it would be a tough budget, and it is taking much longer to hammer out than usual. Last night, council approved the budgets for 40 different departments, which at this point will add $2.2 million to the budget, or 2%. But the final decision on the tax increase will have to wait.
On February 8th, there's still one more issue to deal with, and that's the RCMP's request for an enhancement to their budget. So that enhancement would be about $96,000 for this year, and then about $365,000 for 2022. So council will deal with that on the 8th as well.
The sticking point? A request by RCMP Superintendent Sean Wright for 2 new officers, bringing the complement of officers on paper to 144.
Over the course of the last year, there's been a lot of scrutiny by the media and the community, and we've done a pretty thorough internal scan on where we can improve and do better, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to put some systems in place to really improve the professionalism and capability of our people here at the detachment.
Specifically, the officers will address internal training to achieve 100% compliance with mandatory recertification for use of force, firearms, and less lethal intervention options, crisis de-escalation and mental health, medical and life-saving training, and locally developed training to address local service delivery gaps specific to the community of Prince George.
When you look at a lot of situations where officers have met the basic training and meet the basic requirements, be that Dzansky or the Semi Tim killing in Toronto or several incidents in the United States, really if there had been a higher level of training, a lot of those use of force incidents could have been de-escalated or avoided.
While that will be one issue discussed on February 8th, Council will have to decide how to use the $6 million in restart funding from the province, whether to put some or none towards offsetting the tax hike.
There is a real discussion about it. The commonly used phrase is, how much of this do we want to kick the can down the road? Because we do know that despite what happens with COVID this year, we're still going to be impacted in 2022, 2023. So we need to be very methodical about how we go through this and how we use those restart dollars.
At this time, Council is fairly split on how to use the restart dollars, with some saying a 0% budget is the goal, while others would like to use the fund more sparingly. Cheryl Jan, CKPG News.
It was a tough start to the month of February for us at the Jim Pattison Broadcast Group and the community, following the death of our longtime morning radio show host and friend, Mike Benny. Mike worked in radio for 35 years and made a special connection with us and you, the listener.
We get these nice little wristbands.
Yep. Mike spent much of his radio career working mornings. His voice touched multiple generations of listeners that grew up listening to Mike on the radio.
It may seem like a small thing, but it's a big thing for people that, that grew up with Mike at the breakfast table. He was an extra member of the family that didn't eat the food, but he was, Uncle Mike that was with, mom and dad and the kids for 35 years in the community. That's what, outside of the morning show, it's what a guy like Mike does to represent the company, but ultimately represent the greater community.
In the fall of 2019, Mike was diagnosed with lung cancer, and since that time had been receiving treatment. He passed away Thursday morning. One of Mike's many lasting legacies was his mentorship of many young broadcasters.
This is really considered a training ground before you move on to the big markets. To have a quality guy like, with the name of Rick Kelly, of Doug Jones, of Darren Coogan, and Mike Benny to come to the community and want to stay in the community and do it for 35 years, that is so important to us as a company, because you just can't buy that kind of loyalty. It does so much for the brand and the listeners, and clearly with everything we've been hearing, the feedback about the loss of Mike.
Mike not only forged a special bond with many of us at the station, but also with his audience and the community.
Yeah, we'll be there all morning long or all day long, talking about the need for a new primary health care clinic.
whether he was out assisting in somebody's cause, a nonprofit organization, or whether he was doing his morning show. He was full of life. He just had that absolute passion and commitment to the city. And I remember shortly after I became mayor, he gave me a call, I think the next day after the election in 2014, and said, hey, come on, drop by the show. Let's have a chat. And I did. And it was just before Christmas, maybe late November, early December. And it was easy. It was easy to talk to him. It was easy for him to, I think, just have a conversation.
Mike leaves behind his wife and 4 kids. No word yet on when a memorial service will be held. In lieu of flowers, his family asks that you make a donation to the Canadian Cancer Society.
It was a busy day at the vaccine call centers at the beginning of March as more than 1.7 million British Columbians registered for their COVID-19 vaccine in the first few hours.
Starting next Monday, the doors of the Prince George Conference and Civic Center will be open behind me to give COVID-19 vaccinations to those 90 plus in the Prince George community. Now, across other communities in Northern Health, there'll be a number of other clinics, over 30 in different communities, to try and get seniors vaccinated against COVID-19.
Those 90 plus, among with Indigenous over 65, are up first, quickly expanding further starting Wednesday as part of Phase 2, which in total includes 15,000 people in Northern BC.
We've organized this across the region based on the population to be immunized and the amount of vaccine that we're getting at various times over the course of the next 3 to 4 weeks.
This is when you should be calling, depending on your age. A reminder, this is not first come, first serve. Northern Health is confident in supply, and if you miss your call-in time, don't worry. You can call any time after your eligibility window opens. You are asked not to call until you do become eligible. Many in BC clearly not getting that message on Monday. 1.7 million calls were received in the first few hours.
It's really important in order to allow those over 90 to get their appointments that we only call when our age group becomes open for calling and for booking appointments.
Northern Health echoing similar conditions. Call centers overwhelmed. Dix pledging to do better.
I understand, and our provider has to understand that our call center provider has to know that we have to do better in responding as well. And we will need to, because the demand isn't going to get less, it's going to grow.
To register for yourself or a loved one, this is a reminder of what you'll need. Basic personal information, including your health number.
They will be taken through the process of making an appointment and scheduling a time that they can come in for an appointment through the call center. And if they have an email or a way to be texted, they will receive confirmation.
In Northern Health, we know clinic locations for Phase 2 include 30 different locations in Northern BC. There will also be mobile clinics moving between more remote areas. Northern Health confirming they are not planning any drive-through clinics.
Now, the important thing is you have to call in to schedule your appointment to get vaccinated against COVID-19. That number on the bottom of your screen right now. If you are not able to call, a loved one can call for you. But of course, you have to call that number to get your appointment to get vaccinated here at the Prince George Conference and Civic Center, as well as all of the other clinics across Northern Health. Caden Fanshaw, CKPG News.
Down in Quesnel, plans are starting to come together for the Highway Interconnector project. But even though the ground hasn't been broken just yet on the project, more and more plans continue to come together to make this project more and more realistic.
It's a project that won't be cheap, but with every day that goes by, the plans are more and more realistic, even though the timeline appears to be lengthy.
The discussion of getting the highway traffic off of the downtown core of Quesnel is a 50-plus year discussion.
But there is a reason to be optimistic. The process to make this happen is moving along with an accepted route. There were many options discussed originally, but this will be the way, a 4-lane stretch along the Quesnel River to divert heavy traffic from the downtown core while not being too far away. And there is reason to get it done sooner than later.
The bridges need to be replaced. They're going to have to be replaced within the next 5 to 8 years. and the added strip of highway is only a nominal additional cost to the replacement of the bridges. So there's a number of things coming together that suggest this is the project.
The idea of the road within proximity to downtown has put many downtown businesses also in favor. Optimistic it won't be too far for tourists to stop. But most importantly, it's a safety thing for big trucks, as there seems to be more of them ending up on Front Street. But the funding is still needed to ensure the plan becomes reality.
It's critically important for us to get in front of both the provincial and the federal government. A project of this scale needs to have the support of understanding it's in the provincial and national best interest. And so I think that's the next steps that we need to really look at. It's not just about the city of Quesnel, it's in the context of, say, the Caribou Connector.
Those dollars are being worked on. To move on to the next phase, about $1 million will be needed for an advanced design portion before the big contract could be awarded in a matter of years, which early estimates pegged it up to $500 million.
I believe that if we can get that money approved and take it to that stage, then we have a real project that we can shop around for funding. And this is the kind of project that the federal rural infrastructure program really is designed to fund.
It may seem distant, but the wheels are still very much rolling on the transformation for driving in Goldpan City.
It was a long time coming, but there is now labor peace at the University of Northern British Columbia following a new labor agreement which was announced in April. Cheryl Jan has more.
This was the scene in late 2019. Contract talks between the university and its faculty association failed to reach a negotiated settlement. The dispute stretched into the new year when the matter went to an arbitrator.
Over the last while, we got into the discussions around where we were with the collective agreement with the faculty association, and very good and positive discussions, which I think speaks to open communication and relationship building and moving forward. And then in the last little while, we were able to agree on an agreement outside of arbitration.
The agreement was reached through negotiation rather than arbitration, which was significant for the Faculty Association, and the agreement is somewhat historic for UNBC.
I think it's been almost a decade since we've last ratified a contract with the employer. So this is really big. Our members voted 98% in favor of ratification. And so it really shows the employer, the students, our fellow colleagues with CUPE and United 40 that we are pleased with this contract.
The contract is retroactive to July 1st of 2019 and will remain in place until the end of June 2023. The new deal covers 500 faculty, including professors, instructors, lecturers, seasonal lecturers, librarians, and senior lab instructors.
What pleases us the most is that the contract that we signed benefits long-term full professors. It benefits young assistant professors moving forward because their pay increases have substantially increased. And it also helps our librarians and senior lab instructors correct their salary structures as well.
He says the contract brings UNBC in line with other post-secondary institutions. With the labour dispute leading to picket lines in the fall of 2019 and the start of 2020 with full-blown shutdown because of the pandemic, Interim President Dr. Jeff Payne says this contract means a new age at UNBC, especially with students expected to return to in-person classes this coming September.
Putting that now and allowing us to move forward, students coming back onto campus, the launching of the 5 faculties just last week really speaks to exciting times here at UNBC.
Both parties feel this contract marks the beginning of a new era of labour relations at UNBC. Cheryl Jan, CKPG News.
Coming up next on A Year in Review, a new chief was elected for the Lheidli and is already making a significant impact. More after the break. Members of the Lheidli elected a new chief in April to lead their community. Chief Darlene Logan won with 151 votes in a 3-way race. Our Dave Branco caught up with the new chief.
The media had a chance to meet some of the newest members of the Clé-Clé-Tenay leadership team on Friday. Chief Darlene was happy to win and a bit overwhelmed by the support she received.
They were saying it's been a long time since we had a female chief, since 1969, which was the previous chief, Mary Pius, and they were very excited, new change, more community involvement, and that's what they want.
As for her resume, she has worked for the band for 13 years and was a counselor for the last 6.
So they know they can come to me and talk to me about anything. So they know I'm here, they know I'm available, and they know that my door is always open. And my policy from the very beginning was I have nothing to hide, and neither should the band. So they know they can come in and ask any question they want, and I will give it to them.
Also newly elected to council was former Chief Dominic Frederick, who led the community for 14 years.
The experience I bring with them is 14 years of, hard labor, working hard, for the community, and the community only, and that's the thing, and I think we'll always keep our chief intact, to stay focused, on the community, and and that's where it's at, it's with the community.
The newly elected chief expects to continue to develop relationships with ongoing projects.
It's the same business as usual. We're going to move forward. Education's still going to be a priority. Housing's still going to be a priority. Like it's water and sewer on the reserve. But I want to erase that invisible line where it says on reserve, off reserve. We're all one community, so we should be treated as one.
The new council is set to meet for the first time on Monday. Chief and council are voted in for 2-year terms. Dave Branco, CKPG News.
To Kamloops Taste-Equetmik leadership announced at the end of May the tragic discovery of hundreds of human remains near the former Kamloops Indian Residential School.
This is really going to be hitting home to a lot of our people. Like these are children, and it is devastating to, be bringing this up and to be sharing this information, but it's something that, we have to.
Kamloops Taste-Equetmik Cookpee Roseanne Casimir has confirmed the grim discovery of the remains of 215 children buried on the grounds of the former residential school.
In their initial findings, they were saying that from what they can tell and from the size, they're as little as, potentially 3 years old, quite young.
Crews confirmed the tragic scene over the weekend using a ground-penetrating radar specialist. The surveying work is continuing, and it's possible more bodies will be found.
We'll be waiting for a report that'll be coming out in mid-June. I know that we'll be meeting with the coroner and having dialogue with the RCMP. And, that's all taking place as well.
Work on the site dates back to the early 2000s, and Kamloops ensured it was done in a culturally appropriate way with the band's language and cultural department and knowledge keepers.
As a reminder to everyone that the legacy of the residential school isn't over yet. It isn't that that you can just turn a page and then everything is good.
Alongside the groundwork, the Secwepemc Museum's archivist is working with the Royal BC Museum to find any other relevant information to assist, including any records of these deaths.
It was inevitable that the grave sites would be found. What's shocking is the amount. When you're thinking about 250 unmarked graves, these children should have been buried with dignity.
Crews have yet to determine the extent of the site, but given the sensitive nature of what was found, band officials want to make sure its members and surrounding communities who had children attend the school were made aware.
It brought tears to my eyes. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm an auntie, and and the impact that it's had on our council to be able to, going through this and knowing that, we have to share this, not only with our membership at every single level.
Hundreds of people also gathered at a former residential school in Fraser Lake at the end of May to remember the 215 children who never made it home to their families in Kamloops.
On the former LeJac Residential School lawns, close to 300 people gathered to remember 250 children whose bodies were recently discovered buried at a residential school near Kamloops, BC.
We thought that we would come down here to sing and just to ease our sorrows and to pray for the people, pray for the 215 children who the remains were found in Kamloops. And so we didn't expect, we asked some drummers and singers to come down, and then it just grew.
Last week, a plea was put out on social media to gather at LeJac. One organizer says they are pleased with the number of people who attended.
I feel overwhelmed, and I feel comforted by the amount of people who showed up today. Tanya Fulton called me over the weekend, and we were talking about the news and how emotional we were and how difficult it was for us.
Some of those who gathered near the shores of Fraser Lake were once students at LeJac.
Why, I got whipped. I got hit so many times. I come to, I was sitting on the floor looking up at the boys, you know, looking for help to look, and some of them giggle, you know. And at that time, when I grow up, I'm going to make you feel the pain. And that's why all these years in Skid Row,
Many who attended the gathering were devastated and heartbroken when it was revealed that 250 children were discovered in mass graves on the grounds of a residential school in Kamloops.
I think that we need to be open to speaking about the stories, and we know so many stories, and this seems to validate for us a lot of the stories that we've already been told. And so it's we need to allow those stories and those voices to be heard.
There were many residential schools across the country, and according to some who attended this event, there are still many untold stories to come to the surface. In LeJac, Dave Branco, CKPG News.
Coming up next on A Year in Review, a familiar face was named the new city manager in the city of Prince George in July. The full story coming up after the break. A familiar face is now heading up the city of Prince George. Walter Babbage, who has been with the city for over a dozen years, was named the new city manager back in July.
Walter Babbage has been with the city of Prince George since 2008 as the head of legislative services. Most recently, he shared the position of acting city manager. But now it's official. The word acting is gone.
City Council sets the policies and the strategic plan and the priorities, the strategic priorities, and it's administration's job to implement that plan and implement those priorities. And the city manager is ultimately accountable to make sure that happens. So we get policy direction from council, broad policy direction, and administration makes it happen under the leadership of the city manager.
Babbage's familiarity with the city and more recently some of the trials and tribulations between administration and council over issues of project cost overruns and the like make it easier to begin rebuilding that trust.
We took a little longer than anticipated. Walt's been acting in the position for about 8 or 9 months. So that gave him an opportunity, I think, really to show some direction that he wanted to take the city in. So I think that all plays a part of it, yeah.
Since taking over as acting city manager in late September with the departure of Kathleen Soltis, Babbage has made some major changes, such as streamlining the city's organizational structure and shuffling departments to better reflect their roles and responsibilities, adapting protocols in accordance with COVID-19, changing the overtime procedures for exempt staff, and the big one, changing the discretionary spending powers of the city manager. So what's next?
It remains a really challenging time for our local government leaders. As you know, we're just started stage 3 or step 3 of the restart plan. So things are starting to feel more like normal. We've received direction from council to prepare for the reopening. So that is our number one priority right now.
Babbage will also have the role of filling his previous job and that of Ian Wells, who recently retired.
And it really is sort of that domino effect. As Walt moves into the city manager's job, he has to fill his old role. And then you see that domino effect throughout the organization. There's, as you say, you point out in development services, we have somebody acting in Mr. Wells' position, so that job has been posted. We have to fill that.
Babich will officially take over as city manager at tonight's regular council meeting. Cheryl Jan, CKPG News.
After being delayed by more than a month, the ST57 Special Advisors Report was released with some major allegations of both systemic racism and discrimination within School District 57.
The Special Advisors Report for School District 57 was finally released late Friday afternoon. This report, 26 pages long, was months in the making. It contains 45 recommendations for both the Board of Education here and the school district. For some, what this report contained were surprises. For others, not so much.
Right now, initially, we had a bit of shock, but we also have an understanding that, we have a lot of work to do. We look forward to, as a board, working with the special advisors. We also understand that we have a lot of work to do to bring justice and equity into our education system so that all students will find success.
This 26-page report, completed back in June, includes some serious allegations against ST57, including systemic racism, systemic discrimination, poor relations with local First Nations, a lack of consistent and effective governance at all levels, a substantial cultural fear within the district, outdated practices, and a lack of transparency.
What do you make of some of these allegations?
I think when we take a look at it, we have to have an honest reflection as a board and as a district and what that means. I think we're moving forward, and I think one of the key elements of the truth and reconciliation first is you have to come to the truth of where we are. These systems put in place have developed over many, many decades, and the colonialism system is very old. So we just have to take a look at it and have that honest assessment of who we are and how we're going to move forward.
CKPG News reached out to the pair of special advisors behind the report and the Ministry of Education for a response. None were available for an interview before a deadline. The question back locally now is where to go from here. The dust is still settling, but action will be taken to address the 45 recommendations, according to the board chair.
Our first priority is to meet with the advisors and develop a plan of action. I think anytime you have something like this, you need to take time to get it right.
Although this report was done specifically for ST57, there were a number of problems identified that are province-wide. More than a handful of recommendations the ministry will have to address. The special advisors have been rehired to help fix ST57 and make them a template for other districts in the province to follow. A final report back on their progress is due in March of 2022. Caden Fanshaw, CKPG News.
In late September, the federal election took place, and it was Justin Trudeau's Liberals forming a minority government. But the results in the election were practically the same from the previous federal election. Our Anthony Correa hit the streets to get local reaction on the election.
When Justin Trudeau called the election back in August, many people questioned the call.
I think it's very, it's just personal for the Liberal Party to be able to get more power.
Not right now. I think it's just with the pandemic going on, with everything else going on. I don't think it's something we need right now. But.
Probably not. With COVID still going on and with the variant happening, I would say no.
Fast forward to Monday night, and it felt like Groundhog Day, with the Liberals re-elected with almost the same seat count as the last federal election. Here in Prince George, residents expressed mixed feelings on whether or not the election was necessary.
Big waste of money.
It is? Why do you think that?
What has changed? We still got the Liberal minority, and we spent $610 million. People back east still control everything.
We probably could have gone without it.
Yes, I would say it would be unnecessary for still, but I know I totally understand about the pandemic right now, but people has to move forward of all all this pandemic thing. So I think it's really necessary for us though.
I'm not very happy.
Why are you not very happy?
I don't think I could say that on TV.
Trudeau and the Liberals have currently won or are ahead in 158 ridings, 12 seats short of what was needed for a majority government. All of this raising eyebrows as the election was the most costly election ever, with a price tag of just over $600 million. Doug Jarvis is a political science instructor at UNBC, and says that even though the election was called, none of the parties really gained anything from it.
I think the leaders, because they have to keep the faith and show face for their parties. They kind of came out and talked as if it was all victory parties, but it wasn't really for any of them. The Liberals failed to get a majority, which was the initiative behind the election. The Tories had a lead at the beginning, which they failed to capitalize on. And the NDP, they had a hard time really, making a difference, especially in the urban sectors of Canada.
As for where the other parties stand, the Conservatives are ahead in 119 seats, the Bloc Québécois 34, the NDP 25, and the Green Party 1-2. Anthony Correa, CKPG News.
Coming up next on A Year in Review, it was a slow start to the year for the local sports scene, but it sure has ramped up in the last quarter. A full recap coming up after the break. When it came to sports this year, it was a year of complete rebounds. A slow start, but it really ramped up by the end of the year. Our Ethan Reddy has a complete recap of sports in 2021 here in Prince George.
Typically, in the month of January, those in Prince George have their options when it comes to sports entertainment, whether it be in the Cougars, Spruce Kings, or Timberwolves. But 2021 started without any of that. It wasn't until March that the WHL announced the BC division would have a hub center season between Kamloops and Kelowna, which meant the Cougars were back to playing hockey. A young team featuring a wealth of new faces, but the Cougars gave us something to look forward to, finishing the shortened season with a record of 9-10-2-1. Cohen Zimmer had been named the BC Division Rookie of the Year. Meanwhile, the Spruce Kings were also able to return to the ice. They were one of 3 teams in the Chilliwack pod as the league set up mini-leagues across the province. Playing against the Chilliwack Chiefs and the Merritt Centennials, the Spruce Kings finished the 20-game schedule with a 14-5-0-1 record and won the pod championship. Christian Buono and Aaron Trotter were the stars of the show. Buono was the recipient of the Pod's MVP award after finishing the season with 27 points. Trotter, who played his first season with the Spruce Kings this year, took off in a hurry, winning the Pod's top goaltender award by posting a 7-3-1 record with a save percentage of .934 and a goals against average of 1.63. Meanwhile, the UNBC Timberwolves had spent the last bit of winter and into the spring celebrating some of their greatest to ever don the green and gold. UNBC Athletics developed the Timberwolves Wall of Honor. The inaugural class of 2021 was comprised of 15 members, a variety of teams, coaches, and athletes from their CCAA and U Sport years. In subsequent years, smaller classes of inductees will be honored. As we moved into the summer, a certain sports organization was creating headlines and buzz within the city after announcing that 2-time Grey Cup champ Keon Raymond would be the new director of football operations for the Prince George Kodiak's youth football program. It revealed in July that the city was being granted a Canadian Junior Football League expansion franchise. Keon Raymond was then announced as the head coach, and the team would be kicking off their inaugural season in 2022. Later in July, after the cancellation of the event in 2021 due to the rapid spread of COVID-19, the World Curling Federation and Curling Canada both confirmed the World Women's Curling Championships will make their return to the city of Prince George in March 2022. And it wasn't the only event that was announced for the city. Lyle McLeod, president of Biathlon Canada, announced they would be awarding the 2022 Canadian Biathlon Championships to the Caledonian Nordic Ski Club. And that came as the organizing committee for the BC Summer Games was actively working to prepare for Prince George to be playing host next year as well. As the summer came to an end, suddenly the city was seeing sports operating at full tilt. The UNBC Timberwolves returned to the pitch after a 2-year hiatus. The women finished the season with a 1-9-2 record, while the men finished 2-5-5. and the Cougars and Spruce Kings were both preparing for a return to a full schedule. However, the Spruce Kings had another cause for celebration ahead of the 2021-22 season, as it marked 50 years of Spruce Kings hockey in Prince George. The Junior A club announced and revealed plans for the season, including 5 decade-specific jerseys they'd wear over the course of the season. And while the Spruce Kings revealed new threads, as did the Timberwolves. They made national headlines after they became the first college or university athletic program in Canada to unveil an alternate logo and jersey designed completely by an Indigenous artist. While the world continued to face the realities and implications of a pandemic, sport was one of the few escapes we had in 2021. It was a gradual return, but it's powering forward, and here locally, we have a lot to be looking forward to, both in new talent, new teams, and new looks.
Next on A Year in Review, September 30th marked the first Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada. We'll have a full recap coming up after the break. September 30th, Canada had its first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Following the horrific discoveries across the country at former residential schools, residents of Prince George paid tribute to those who didn't make it home and those who did.
These are the sounds that will be coming out of the Lheidli Memorial Park to honor all Indigenous peoples across the country on Truth and Reconciliation Day.
It's a day to reflect on the past, which definitely has its tragic trauma and the sadness is in that, but what we want to reflect on this historical first day of National Truth and Reconciliation is to recognize the survivors, to recognize the descendants of the survivors, and to recognize the shared histories of all people.
Unfortunately, due to the rise of COVID-19 cases in the north and here in Prince George, a majority of the public events have been canceled. Lheidli's chief says you can still do your part at home.
Just reflect on truth and reconciliation and what it means to you. For non-Indigenous Canadians, it means a day of learning. Like I've said in the past, just take 5 minutes and learn about your local history. A day to read more and learn more about the truth and what happened to Indigenous Canadians for the past 150 years.
There's one day where you can take your time to look, listen, and learn, and have the time to put action towards the history, the shared histories and the histories of Indigenous people.
There still will be some events taking place, but scaled down. Opening prayers will start at 11 a.m., followed by
having gatherings or having marches or bringing flowers to the park, you know, and honoring the ancestral territory of the Lheidli. It's a very special grounds. This is where we're going to be on that day. There's a history there that needs to be shared.
Right now, this is only a federal holiday. Be that as it may, there are many people who will be working still. The hope is that everyone can enjoy this holiday, reflect, remember, and come together. Randy Murray Adams, CKPG News.
Canfor and Canfor Pulp announced a major investment for the city of Prince George in October. A new plant will be built, and it will not only create a new industry here in Prince George, but a new industry across Canada.
It was the news many had been waiting for. Canfor has announced a positive final investment decision for construction of the first phase of Arbios Biotech's plant in Prince George at the site of the present Intercon pulp mill. Music to Mayor Lynn Hall.
I think there was some trepidation. It was a huge investment that they would have to put forward between the two companies. But as we see, we've got the news release from Canfor that came out yesterday announcing that they have made their final decision on investment, and they're moving forward.
Ultimately, the plant will convert forest residuals, primarily bark, using water under high pressure and high temperatures to create low-carbon transportation fuels. The carbon intensity of Arbios biofuel will be 70 to 80% less than the fossil fuel-based gasoline and diesel used today. This is the first phase of a multi-phased plant. It's expected to generate 150 direct jobs and 600 indirect jobs with completion of the first phase before the end of next year. For the manager of economic development for the city, this is part of a much bigger picture for this community.
I am particularly encouraged by the amount of research that went into this project. I mean, I heard about it initially several years ago, and they have been working on it behind the scenes, doing their research and development and getting to this point where they can make an announcement. And it's just so exciting to see where it started and how it's going to move forward now.
And it serves as one more tool in the economic development toolkit.
It's not just flipping lumber anymore. It's not blue collar jobs. It's people working at computers. It's innovation, research and development, and coming up with these new products. So I think this is an opportunity for us to shout that from the rooftops, tell people across the province and even around the world will be paying attention to this project.
Tidewater, formerly Husky Oil, recently began work on a multi-million-dollar facility to convert renewable feedstock into diesel that is fully compatible with conventional diesel engines, but with a carbon intensity approximately 80 to 90% lower than conventional diesel. It would seem to the mayor that Prince George is fast becoming a biofuel centre.
We've had a great deal of action around pellet plants. And I think this is just indicative of where we're headed. And this new announcement by Canfor and Arbius is indicative of really that new bioeconomy that's taking place here in Prince George.
The new Arbios plant will be the first of its kind in Canada. Cheryl Jan, CKPG News.
Coming up next on A Year in Review, it was an incident which shocked the community of Vanderhoof. A shooter firing shots at the local RCMP detachment. The shocking story coming up after the break. It was a story which rocked our region in late November. A shooter on the loose in the community of Vanderhoof who fired shots at the RCMP detachment. Our Dave Branco has more on a terrifying day for that northern BC community.
Dozens of RCMP members from around the region arrived in Vanderhoof, responding to reports of an active shooter with a long gun targeting the RCMP detachment on the 100 block of Columbia Street.
Multiple police officers and support units responded immediately. Those officers came from Prince George, Fraser Lake, Burns Lake, Fort St. James, included multiple support units such as ERT and the Police Dog Services, just to name a couple, and immediately responded to Vanderhoof.
With the assistance of the public, the suspect was arrested.
Certainly the calls that were coming in from 911 from the community with information was instrumental and certainly helped the police quickly apprehend, locate and arrest the suspect safely without any injury. And certainly we want to thank those individuals for calling in with the information in a timely manner and providing very intricate information, very detailed info.
The arrest was made less than an hour after the incident began. According to police, the suspect opened fire at the detachment where over a dozen employees were working. The bullet smashed through the exterior windows, striking walls, equipment that flew past workstations where officers and office staff sat. The suspect was finally arrested less than a kilometer away from the RCMP station.
Well, the strategy behind the containment area is certainly to keep people out and to keep the suspect in. And if we can keep the suspect in a smaller space, it certainly will help us apprehend, and in this case, rather quickly and safely. The individual was arrested.
The suspect is 36-year-old Paul Nicholas Russell, charged with one count of attempted murder with a firearm. Russell made a court appearance Friday afternoon in Williams Lake. Dave Branco, CKPG News.
Thanks for joining us for A Year in Review. There are plenty of headlines in 2021, and I'm sure there will be plenty of headlines in 2022. You can tune into CKPG News weeknights at noon, 3, 5, 6, and 11. Thanks for joining us for The Year in Review, and have a great 2022.